Hi guys, I'm back again today with another video, and today we're checking out I spent a month in Europe. 28 things I learned eating their food. Ooh, this is gonna be exciting again. So before we do start, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell button, and let's find out what he found out because we are trying to stick to that. Okay, we're trying to stick to that diet or way of eating, the habit of eating. We want to change it. So let's go.
28 things that I learned spending a month in Europe about the food compared to what it's like in the United States. I spent a month studying what people would eat, what was available at shops and grocery stores, and just trying to maintain my own diet. So here's what I learned. Number one, the portions are way different. Plain and simple. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things. And you feel satiated because that's what's put in front of you. It's kind of funny for me, like if it's put in front of me, I'll typically eat it. Like it's really hard to have portion control. So I noticed that right out the gate. Like breakfast was usually just some kind of a cappuccino or something and maybe something really light, right? It was kind of interesting. It was very little food. And as the day went on, you realize, I haven't eaten that much, but I'm not really that hungry. The second thing I noticed, there was a big emphasis on dairy protein. That's interesting because like you go to a grocery store and you go to their dairy section and they had like cheese that was ultra filtered to have more protein. It's kind of like that Fairlife milk that's in the United States where it's like filtered so it has higher protein. That was like super common. There were like all these high protein beverages. Like there was a company called O, like OH. It was just basically filtered milk, so it would be a carton of milk with 30 grams of protein in a little carton. At first when I saw it, I'm like, oh, is this like a whey protein shake? And then I look at it, I'm like, there's no whey in it, it's just ultra filtered milk. They really had a lot of emphasis on protein from dairy, which is just kind of surprising because you just don't see that a whole lot in the United States. Like at one point, and here's a picture of it, I found these mozzarella balls that were high protein, slightly lower fat, like they had filtered them. It was like a perfect high protein snack. They also had these protein puddings, like they were just milk that was made into like a protein pudding. It's basically like Greek yogurt with more protein. I can't even explain it, but it was awesome. I noticed that there were more cured meats, but a lot of cured meats that were just meat and salt. Okay, it was a little harder to find like traditional meat, right? Like I couldn't just go to a store and just like have a ready-made burger patty or ready-to-eat chicken breast. It was a little harder to find that kind of stuff. But there was a lot of cured meats. And if you were to try to get all your protein intake from that, you'd be loading up on way too much sodium. So it was a little bit difficult, but I noticed that. Number four, there was more emphasis on fruit as an option, especially for dessert. Like if you look on a dessert menu, they would have fruta, like it was there. Fruit was an option. And if you went to like even a gelato place, you've probably seen this, like you could also get fruit. And what's kind of funny is a lot of the local people would be walking around with cups of fruit, whereas the tourists would be walking around with big things of gelato, right? So it was kind of interesting to see that. I liked that because the kids want a gelato. Okay, cool. Well, I don't feel like having gelato right now. I did have gelato, but a lot of times I would just have fruit. The fifth thing, it was a little bit of a shock to me. Dinner was consumed pretty late. Like it was like usually after 8 p.m. And for someone like me that's usually going to bed at like 9 p.m.,
Yeah, this is what I don't know if it was in this video or I mean in this channel wherein I asked. No, I don't think it's this channel. I asked in my other channel like what time people eat dinner. Here in the Philippines is pretty late. 8 to 9 is dinner time. And by that time I'm like super hungry. But the reason why it's so late is because we have, like I told you in yesterday's video, we eat like 6 times a day. So dinner, which is the sixth meal, right? And if you stay up really late, you have midnight snacks. So that's like eating 7 times a day. So dinner is super late, and by that time I'm like dying. And I never understood it, but I found out that it's because we eat so much. Like we have so many snacking time in between real meals. Like we will have a snack before breakfast, and then we will have another snack before lunch, and after lunch, and then before dinner, and then dinner. So it's kind of like too much. Um, but yeah, let me know where you're from and what time is dinner for you.
late. Like it was like usually after 8 p.m. And for someone like me that's usually going to bed at like 9 p.m., this was a bit of a shock. So we didn't necessarily adopt that structure, but I found it interesting. But then I realized that they were going to bed later. and getting up a little later. So their whole just system was staggered back a little bit more. So there's still time between the time they ate dinner and bedtime was still lengthy. It was probably a few hours. So nothing wrong there. Number six, obviously they were walking everywhere. That doesn't have to do with their diet, but I mean, we were clocking like 30,000 steps generally. And we were in the bigger cities, you just realize that that's how you get around, subway, whatever, walk, this, that. It's easily integrated. Number seven, there was no weird preservatives. I'll tell you that. Now I can't speak to whether or not that's going to change a whole lot as far as like food intake, but I just noticed it. There's a lot more stuff banned. Like for example, my daughter got a sniffle part of the way through the trip. And I'm like, okay, let's go check out a little bit of cold medicine for her. The cold medicine didn't have any dyes in it. It was clear and it didn't have the sugar added to it. It didn't have, in fact, my daughter was like, oh, this tastes kind of funny. I'm like, that's the way it should taste. It should taste funny. It shouldn't taste good. It shouldn't have like red dye 40 in it. What's interesting is that even the French fries only had a few ingredients. Like if you went to McDonald's or anything like that, like I checked it out. I mean, I didn't literally eat French fries. I did eat a burger patty from McDonald's. I'll talk about that in a minute. But there's just a lot less stuff added. And obviously that probably reflected into the gluten too. I was able to eat gluten and not have digestive issues with my IBS like I normally do if I'm in the States. If I have gluten here, something's wrong. And it probably has to do with the type of wheat, all this and that. I'm not gonna get into the details there. Number eight, very seldom, unless I was looking at actual processed packaged food, would you find seed oils. Like most restaurants were using butter. Like you actually had to look to find seed oils. And I don't have a hard stance on seed oils one way or the other, to be fully honest. I think it's the oxidized oils that are the problem. But either way, the fact that I wasn't finding a bunch of just like polyunsaturated fats used in cooking, it was pretty interesting. It was a lot of olive oil. Even the processed food snacks, I found some snacks at one point that were like a potato flour and olive oil. Like that was basically their main constituents to make like a processed snack. It's pretty wild. While I'm at it, one of the things that I do like about Thrive Market, which I talk about all the time on my channel, and I know you're thinking, oh, here comes the plug. You're right, is that Thrive Market doesn't adopt a lot because you
Okay, he
if
has
I'm gonna get them a snack at a decent price, recommend that you check. Number nine,
okay,
I noticed that healthy things were just integrated. Let me explain. In the United States, it's almost like we've engineered things out of our diets and out of our life. So for example, we've engineered healthy movement out of our life, so now we have gyms. We've engineered certain things out of our life, so now it's sold as a service, right? So it's like, okay, let's remove, pretty soon they're gonna block the sun and we're gonna remove that as like something that's available and we're gonna sell vitamin D, right? It almost seems like that's just the plan. I know I sound like a weird theorist here, but that's not my point. The point is that that still exists in like a natural integrated way in Europe, and I found that interesting. People were just active more, so they required less gyms. There were less gyms around. And the same kind of thing with the food. It was like, it could all trickle down and you get what I'm really getting at here. One of the first things I noticed, number 10, is that when we first got there at a restaurant, people weren't scrolling their phones at a restaurant. I know that doesn't have to do with food, but there was connection. Like people were, I was surprised even.
That is what I keep saying. Like the one of the things that I don't like is when I am out with people and they're on their phone. I'm like, what is the point of us like hanging out if you're going to be on your phone? We could have done that in our own homes. Like I didn't have to like how do you call it? Take time out of my day to come hang out and then just be on our phones. Like there's no point. Like I don't like that at all. So sometimes when I go out with my friends or whomever, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be giving my time up to this certain people or person because like it's gonna be the same routine of them just being on their phone. Like I'm just wasting my time. If you want to be on our phone, we could have that at home. Okay, I didn't have to waste my time. Like no. And then, like I told you guys, one of my pet peeve is wasting time. Like I cannot, like I don't want to make time for someone or people and then them canceling or like I said, being on their phone. Like hate wasting time. Right? Time is gold, and time is like I could be doing so many other things. So I hate it so much. Um. So yeah, and my friends know that. So whenever they're hanging out with me, I'm like we can take pictures, yes, but imagine like they're playing games or like they are texting or like the whole time. Like, I didn't need to be here. I didn't need to be here if you're not gonna be here also. Ugh, I know, guys. I always rant about it. I'm sorry.
their phones at a restaurant. I know that doesn't have to do with food, but there was connection. Like people were, I was surprised, even teenagers, they were just sitting down at restaurants, looking each other in the eyes and having conversations. And I'm like, wow, get off the plane in America and it's immediately like a family of four sitting there, everyone's just scrolling, not even looking at each other. Anyhow, I digress. Number 11, there's a lot more shellfish. A lot more emphasis on shellfish, particularly in Italy, but we know that's the case. And when you get down to certain areas of Italy, yeah, there's gonna be more shellfish, but just in general, like I compare that to the coast in California, like shellfish is still like one or two things on the menu. I mean, you look at shellfish and calamari and all these options in Italy, it's crazy. And I'm a huge fan of shellfish for the mineral reasons, for the selenium, for all that. Also, some of the highest levels of protein as far as concentration and amino acid profile is concerned. So really good stuff. I was happy to see that. Number 12, I didn't see any reduced fat products. I didn't see them like engineering fat out of food. I didn't see things like where they were trying to reduce fat. And I mean, this goes without saying, probably, maybe I should say it. I didn't see a lot of obese people or overweight people. The overweight and obese people that I would see were typically tourists. So the people that were living there clearly doing something right, but it's just interesting. They weren't trying to reduce or engineer certain ingredients out of their food. It was just food, right? So like I didn't see advertisements for this has low fat or only X grams of fat. It was pretty wild. Number 13, this is kind of interesting. I didn't see any vegan advertisements. I'm not even anti-vegan, okay, don't get me wrong. But I didn't see, there wasn't this huge push. In the US, I feel like it's kind of being pushed really hard. Over there, it was just like, no, people like, yeah, I'm sure there were vegan people, I'm sure there were plant-based people, but it wasn't like, there weren't posters everywhere, there weren't things labeled as plant-based or vegan. It was just kind of like, if you were vegan, you would choose what you would choose and it wasn't thrown in your face. And there was actually a lot less emphasis on being plant-based, whereas in the US, the way we even position other countries is like, hey, everyone else is going plant-based. Actually, I noticed way more dairy options. I didn't notice as much meat, but I noticed way less vegan options. Let's put it that way. I found that interesting. Number 14, the vending machine options were awesome. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't total trash in those things, but there were also refrigerated vending machines. I saw a vending machine that was a milk vending machine that had varying profiles of fat for milk, like 2% whole. It was really cool. And then there was literally like a fitness vending machine at one point that had protein shakes and electrolyte drinks. And I was like, this is insane. This is so wild. Like they actually have different vending options. And then if you go to a regular vending machine, I found it interesting that yes, 80% of the stuff was garbage, but they still had like 20% of kind of healthier options, which just doesn't exist at all in the US. Number 15, I noticed they ate more like 2.5 meals per day. It was like small, very small breakfast, moderate lunch, and a little bit bigger dinner. So that's not good, bad, or ugly, but it's a little bit flip-flop from what like we say is good, like bigger breakfast, lighter lunch, really light dinner. I'm sure some cultures, depending on where you are in Europe, do that, but I was surprised to see it a little bit flip-flopped. Number 16, huge emphasis on polyphenols, and not advertised as polyphenols, but just the foods that were available.
What are they?
Deep leafy greens, healthy nuts and seeds, and a lot of fruit. There's just naturally a lot of polyphenols, which we're seeing now have a huge benefit when it comes down to longevity, huge benefit when it comes down to gut health. Polyphenols are the bee's knees, no matter which way you're getting them. 17,
Oh, I didn't know that. Let me write it down to research.
And the fermented dairy in general. Holy cow. At one point I took a video and put it on my Instagram.
Yogurt and
It was
I are best
too
friends. I think me and dairy in general, I love it. It's like you can catch me with yogurt like almost all the time. I just love it. It's so good. And you can just put oats and fruits and nuts, and it's just a complete heavy meal. And you're just like, what? So good.
Holy cow. At one point I took a video and put it on my Instagram. It was 2 full aisles of yogurt options. I don't just mean like a small section on one side and a small section on the other. I mean one aisle, the other side of that aisle, and then a whole other aisle and other side of the aisle. So 4 rows of shelves, 30, 50 feet long, with various yogurt options and kefir options and cottage cheese options and just various fermented dairies. I was like, what in the world is going on? the emphasis on like probiotic foods was huge. Now, I'm sure some of those yogurts, I know a lot of those yogurts were riddled with sugar and weren't that great, but it was still fascinating. Number 18, I did find it hard to order a burger without a bun. And I can, get by with some Italian. I lived in Italy when I was a kid, so I still understand a little bit, and I could order in Italian, and even then it was like ordering a burger without a bun was just a little bit weird to them. It was like, now granted, we weren't eating at places where you could get burgers like regularly, so that could be, but I did find it harder to just get a big piece of ground beef. Number 19, lots of chocolate. Like in the US, you get chocolate at the check stand, but there were like rows of chocolate. And good chocolate, good dark chocolate, but also a lot of milk chocolate, the not so good stuff. I'm not gonna lie, that was more of my guilty pleasure than anything. I probably had like half a chocolate bar a day, but I was walking like 30, 40,000 steps, plus my workouts, I could afford some chocolate. I usually went for the darker stuff, but it was cool seeing all the different options. Number 20, emphasis on sun. At one point, I didn't get a picture of it, but I even saw a billboard that was advertising to get out in the sun. It was like, come out and like enjoy the sun. And it was in Tuscany, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is weird, like you just don't see that. Like instead in the US we might push like, hey, like stay indoors and take a supplement, buy this. Instead it was like saying,
Before I was whilst getting ready for video, I was on TikTok like everybody does, and I was listening to this podcast wherein the lady was like, "Yeah, um, we need vitamin D, obviously, right? And it shouldn't be via supplements, right? It's like we're staying inside so much that we take supplements to supplement for those things when the sun is right outside. But also in cities that is like has air pollution, it's really hard to get vitamin D as well. So it's kind of hard also if you are in a city wherein the sun is either covered or by skyscrapers or then air polluted places as well. So yeah, I don't know.
outside. So I just liked that emphasis. And something about the sun in the Mediterranean actually felt more healing. It felt more beneficial. Number 21, this isn't necessarily a good thing. Lots of caffeine. Yep, there was definitely a lot of caffeine. It wasn't a surprise to see, have a couple shots of espresso, have a cappuccino in the morning, have a cafe latte in the afternoon, whatever. And people that live in Europe know that that's part of life. And I'm sure if you're visiting, you're indulging in that stuff more. But I'm not gonna lie, the milk tastes so much better there that I was having probably a little bit too much caffeine, or I'd switch to decaf and still probably consume, I don't know, probably too much in the way of milk. But either way, it's interesting that I could get by with like a breakfast basically being a little piece of cured meat and a couple of either macchiatos or cappuccinos. 22, there wasn't as much alcohol as I thought. For the Mediterranean region being pretty pro-wine, I was surprised to see that like alcohol wasn't heavily pushed. It wasn't at the restaurants, they're not trying to upsell you into alcohol. And I know that alcohol is still a part of European culture, but it wasn't glorified the way it is in the States. It was just different. It was more seamlessly integrated as a mild part of culture versus like this side piece that you like turn into a different human being to go get blasted. Number 23, there was lots of smoked salmon. I found this interesting as someone that really likes good quality smoked like sockeye salmon and stuff. I'm sure some of it was lower quality, but it was like every place we would see breakfast would offer smoked salmon on multiple dishes, or in buffet fashion, it was always there. If you ordered something like a Benedict, the default was salmon. So it was really just a lot more of that, which is interesting, whereas in the US, it might be more default to ham or bacon. Number 24, I found supplements like whey protein. They were harder to find in like a regular setting. You had to go to a very deliberate place. At one point, I was like, okay, maybe I should buy some whey protein because I brought some with me, but I didn't bring that much. And I'm like, okay, it was hard for me to get adequate protein, I will say. Like if I lived there, I could probably figure it out, but bouncing around, it was tough to get adequate protein, especially on the go. So whey protein would have been important, but like there weren't supplement shops all over the place like there are in the bigger cities in the US. And you couldn't go to a grocery store and just find whey protein. It wasn't just as common. Again, if I lived there and I knew where to look, maybe, but it was definitely harder to find. This one's weird, but number 25, this was particularly interesting. I found it very easy to go to a gym as a guest. So in the US, if I go to use like a guest pass at a gym, like, hey, hi there, could I please buy a guest pass? It's like, okay, this is gonna be $30. You need to sign away your firstborn. You need to sign this and this and this and waivers and this and that. It was there. Like I could go to a kiosk and just buy a guest pass, scan a barcode, and be in a gym working out. It was like they put a little bit more faith that I'm not going to stub my toe and sue them or something. It was pretty wild. Number 20.
Do people do that? Like you stub your toe, but then you sue the gym. Like you're the idiot. But anyways, here you just walk in and work out and then pay and then you go. Yeah, you can get a membership if you want, or you can just walk in. Like maybe for the first time, nobody has ever seen you before, and then you will never come back. It's okay. Nobody cares. As long as you're gonna work out, you're gonna pay. It's okay.
26, things were not over salted. As a matter of fact, in the beginning, I found myself adding some salt to things because I'm like, my taste buds were adjusted to higher salt food in the US. Now, the cured meats are an exception. Those have a lot of salt. But interesting, I just didn't know. I noticed like if you ordered even a burger, it tasted kind of bland. Or if you ordered, at one point we had pizza, which was amazing. But even that, it just was focusing more on the real flavors of the food. And I just found it interesting. I mentioned this before, but number 27, I did some research to look at the McDonald's patties. The McDonald's patties seem to be different in Europe than they are in the US. So there were a number of times, probably at least 5 or 6, where I went to a McDonald's and just ordered patties. I'm like, okay, I need to get some protein at this point, and I will deal with whatever maybe mystery stuff is in there. But upon a quick search, I realized that there is less soy. Some say that it was actually even pure beef. I don't know it was 100% beef. I couldn't find a solid answer on the difference between the beef and the McDonald's Europe beef and the US McDonald's beef. Either way, it definitely tasted like real beef. Number 28, I loved this. The saunas were actually hot. Public saunas were 200 degrees. That was amazing because like the gyms here, they feel like, I don't know, like maybe just like a dog's breathing on you or something. It's lukewarm. You're barely breaking a sweat. You practically have to do. There, it was like, dang, these are my people. They like the heat. These are hot saunas. Like at one point, there was one that was like 210 degrees. I'm like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It should be a hot sauna. Anyhow, it was interesting to find that things are very, very different with how food is looked at. And the cool thing is that these weren't monumental things that couldn't be implemented into daily life in the United States. Now, the food quality, head and shoulders above the US. Just tastes better, the nutrient profile seemed better, but just the actual depth of the food. When you would bite into something, you'd feel nourished, and you'd feel like it was real food. And it didn't feel bland, and it didn't feel like it was covered up with something else. As always, keep it locked here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.
I feel like maybe in the US they're more about like, oh, we're doing it for the money. We're not doing it for nutrition or passion for cooking. It's more of like, how many can we sell in a day and how fast can we get it and how like the cheapest quality, right? It's like, how are we gonna sell this pen as like but like make produce this pen as cheap as possible but sell it as expensive as possible. That's probably what the what is going on in most, not everyone, but most in the US. It's all about the money, the money, the money, and they don't care about the quality. They don't care about who they're killing, right? They're like, as long as the money's coming in, we're good. And then Europe is more about, okay, how are we gonna provide a healthier option, right, to the people? Like, of course, it's gonna taste good and it's gonna be healthy as well. And obviously, they also have like I think in yesterday's video, the people who check like the quality of stuff, if you're actually following protocol and stuff. So it's more about the humanity than the capitalism. But anyways, beautiful peeps, thank you for joining me if you are. This has been fascinating, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.